Okay, this is the first episode of ALI-M.O.N.Y. A-L-I-M period, O period, N period, Y period. Ali, Mayor of New York. I'm going to talk for a little bit about what I would do if I was Mayor of New York. First, let me give you some background where ALI-M.O.N.Y came from. It was the office, it was many summers ago, and we were forming a company softball team at our comedy theater. And everybody was getting softball names for the back of their jerseys. And someone made a joke that mine should be Ali-M.O.N.Y because of Ali. Or Ali. I don't really listen for pronunciation, and you can pronounce my name Ali or Ali. I don't mind. I've been called many things in my life. I've been called Big Al when I was little. Al when I got bigger. I've been called Papa Bear when I went to Burning Man or in Chicago. I was also called Leafer in college. Ali Farahnakian, Ali Farahnakian, Ali Farahnakian. So they called me Leafer. And I had one of those names growing up in America where people would say Ali or they'd say Ali, and people would say, which do you prefer? And I said, I don't listen for pronunciation. I listen for malice. And as long as you're saying my name with love in your heart, I don't mind. Because I had one of those names growing up that people used to say Ali, like Muhammad Ali, with anger, because it was the 70s, and he had chosen not to go to Vietnam. And people were angry about that, so they passed that on to their children. And so when their children told them they had a new friend in school named Ali, they would probably say, like Muhammad Ali, because it was a new name in the 70s, or a new name where I lived. There just weren't that many Alis aside from Muhammad Ali. I'm getting off track here. So someone said you should be called Ali-M.O.N.Y as a joke for my softball name. And somehow, a play on words as a small-time comedian, which is what I am. I said Ali-M.O.N.Y like A-L-I-M-O.N.Y, and I'd remember that M-O-N-Y was Mayor of New York. So I thought, I'm going to take this stone someone is throwing at me, because alimony is a very emotional topic, because you have to pay someone once you are divorced, whether it's a man or a woman, you have to pay them monthly for a period of time. So it's a very emotional topic, and I believe at the time, my wife was working in the office, and so I said Ali-M.O.N.Y like Ali, Mayor of New York, and that's where it came from. And from that, the idea came from people, I don't know why, periodically I'll get in conversations with people in taxis, taxi cab drivers and other people, and they would say to me, you should run for Mayor of New York. Now, if you hear something once, you go, okay. But if you hear it multiple times, these are clues from the universe. I get a lot of clues from the universe. We all do. And that's a horn right there. That's a cry for help, because I am recording in New York City right now on 29 between 6th and 7th on the second floor of a building that overlooks a 17-story public storage facility. And so the idea, the premise was, what if I did run for Mayor of New York? What would the campaign be? What would I want to tell people? What would I want for the city that has been my home for over 2 decades? I came here in August of 1999 to write for Saturday Night Live during its 25th anniversary season. That's what brought me here. And when that ended, I stayed and I was teaching and deciding what to do next in my life. And then 9/11 happened. And for those who were here and remember, it was a very emotional time. And I was about 33 years old, so it was the age of reckoning. 33 is a time where people, for whatever reason, they go one way or the other. 33 was the death of Christ, Jesus Christ, John Belushi, Chris Farley, Bruce Lee. So it's a point in people's life where it's time to make a decision. What are you going to do with your life? Because a lot of great people have left the earth. At that time, they graduated from Earth School. And so it was after 9/11. I was a founding member of a comedy theater, and I just had a sense of either I'm going to go to Los Angeles and begin a career there as a small-time comedian and a small-time actor, to try to be one of 5, 10 on the call sheet. What that means is there's a call sheet in entertainment for a TV show. The star of the show is number 1 on the call sheet. Then the second person's number 2. Then there's 3 on the call sheet, 4, 5. I would have been happy to have been top 5, top 10 on a call sheet on a show that I liked. playing a role that I liked. What roles would I have liked? I would have loved a role like Danny DeVito in Taxi, Ed Asner in A Mary Tyler Moore, Archie Bunker would have loved a role like that. Anybody on MASH, but would have loved to have played a Hawkeye type character or Trapper John on MASH. But after 9/11, I decided that I was going to stick around and I was going to try to put out a shingle after having been an apprentice for 13 years at other comedy theaters in Chicago and New York. And it felt like it was time to do something. And so I started a little comedy theater. We got the key September 24th, 2002. So a little bit over a year after 9/11, I decided the best way I could help is do what I somewhat know how to do, some way I can help, and take an empty space that had been empty for many, many years, that had a sign in the window that said theater/assembly hall for rent. And I called, and I saw the space. And then the landlord went radio silent, and then 3 months later, I remembered Vince Lombardi had 4 rules that he coached by: hard work, second effort, loyalty, and love. And I put in the second effort. So I called back, we met again, and I told him I would sign the lease personally, attached to my name, my social security number. And we signed a 5-year lease, and we set sail as a little comedy theater, an improv theater, the Pit, the People's Improv Theater, and we began the journey as a bricks and mortar space with a shingle out front, just like Colonial Williamsburg, which I love visiting Colonial Williamsburg. And I have a fantasy of some kind of eventually going, maybe working there for a summer in one of the shops or giving tours. There's something about Colonial Williamsburg that, I don't know, I was really drawn to. It could have been, placing my hand where George Washington placed his hand on a banister. It could have been walking on cobblestone that Thomas Jefferson walked on and where they ate. But there was something very cool about it. So that began the journey of me staying in New York City, and now our comedy theater is 21 years old. But periodically I do get folks telling me that you should run for mayor of New York, and I want to be very clear. I do not want to be the mayor of New York City. I really don't want to be in politics in any way, shape, or form. It seems like you really have to have the stomach for it, and I don't know. I don't know if I have the stomach for it, but I do have, to some degree, the ideas for it, or things I'd like to see get done, because the city that I love is getting more and more precarious every day in terms of mental illness on the streets, in terms of unhoused folks on the streets, in terms of the cost of living here. And I don't quite know what to do to help. Now, our businesses, what remain after COVID, we surrendered 4 businesses during COVID. It's the nature of it. 3 businesses and 1 in North Carolina. So everything we operate are on 29th between 6th and 7th. So what we try to do is keep our side of the street clean, and the other side. In fact, when we came back and we reopened after 14 months, we were shut down for over a year. The theater kept going online. March 12th, 2020 was the first day of the pandemic, the lockdown. And by order of the mayor of New York and the governor of New York, we locked it down. By the end of March, we had our classes online, but there was nothing in person anymore. And the bar was shut down immediately. It's surreal to think about how quickly it happened. But in that last week before it, the run-up, it started the rumblings of there's going to be a lockdown. We didn't even know what a lockdown was. And so we locked it down. And the streets got to be very, very bad. A lot of garbage. Because what happened was all the people who, there but for the grace of God go I, normally would go to a Starbucks or a library or someplace. They had nowhere to go, so they all came up to the surface of the streets. And it was everywhere. To some degree, to me, it was the way Katrina shined the light on the sins of slavery in New Orleans and Louisiana, because it just brought everybody who had suffered in some way, shape, or form from slavery. And you can say, well, that was a long time ago, but no, that the effects of it echo through time. and will always echo through time, because this nation was built on slavery, and there are states that are slave states, and slave states don't just become free states, they morph into different versions of slavery. That's life. I'm not hopefully saying something that is profound. It's just a matter of, you don't just go from being, we were a slave state and fought for slavery, and then when the Civil War ended, we just changed our tune. The tune didn't change, it got played differently. The tune was the same, but it just was played with a different type of cacophony, different notes. And so we began by cleaning our streets, cleaning 29 between 6th and 7th. So when we came back, we didn't have enough work to give our caretakers. Those are the folks who do the thankless work of cleaning our spaces and organizing them, and we appreciate them for doing it. But in order to give them more hours, we said, okay, you need more hours, I understand that. Let's start by sweeping the streets in the morning and in the afternoon. That should give you an extra hour a day. And we had a garbage can that we had an artist paint Pioneers, our bar, on the side of it, and it's on wheels. And they start in front of our bar at 138 West 29th, and they go down the street, and they go by our theater, the Pit, at 154 West 29th, and then they go to the corners, sweep around the garbage cans in the corners, cross the street, go back up the street, garbage cans around the corners, and then come back down and do a rectangle. Side note, the garbage cans seem to need to be updated. They seem like they've been the same garbage cans for a long time. They seem small, but I get it. Someone's got to pick those up and throw them in the back of garbage trucks. And again, garbage men, thankless job. I mean, when you see a garbage man or a garbage woman, person, thank them for what they do. If you want to know who has real value to a city, imagine what would happen if they didn't do their job for 2 weeks. If the accountants didn't do their jobs for 2 weeks, okay, I don't know if we'd notice. The attorneys didn't do their jobs for 2 weeks at the city, I don't think we'd notice. But if garbage men, I don't want to say garbage people because that seems like a negative thing. Garbage person, garbage humans, garbage engineers, if they don't do their job, you know immediately. And I think you have to look at people who do work in the city in terms of what would happen if they didn't do their job for 2 weeks. You would know how valuable they are. Whether that's the garbage department, the MTA, the bus drivers, subway drivers, the police officers, firefighters, first responders, all very important. Unfortunately, now that there's Uber, if cab drivers stopped driving the taxi, people would just take Uber and Lyft. The time for the cab drivers to have struck and tried to get what they might have should have got, when the 50-cent MTA tax went on to their vehicles, so that every time they drive their taxi, they have to pay 50 cents to the MTA. I think a strike of that nature is over, although I will say the same cab ride that cost me around $10, including tip, to get to work from where I live is now $25. And, I don't know, I guess something going up that amount, 150%, roughly, in, I would say, 20 years. I suppose you call that inflation. Again, where does inflation come from? Why can't milk and bread be the same price it was 100 years ago? Why did it have to go up? What's different? The difference is probably the cost of all the things it takes, whether it's the rent, the insurance, the electricity, all those creep up, and that's where inflation comes from. So a lot of people would probably say to me, well, what is your mantra, or what is your vision for the city? And to me, it's about keeping it simple. Clean streets, safe streets, free streets. What does that mean? It means if you begin by cleaning the streets, and again, I don't know who's going to necessarily do it. We do it ourselves. I don't know who does it for other streets around New York City. But someone somehow is going to have to make a concerted effort to make sure the streets are clean. And then we're going to have to impart on people that all littering is a cry for help. Now, is there a penalty for littering? Sure, there probably is. But are you going to have police officers enforce giving tickets for littering? Maybe. Might cause altercations. I think you're better off in convincing people that when people litter, you are crying for help. You're basically saying, no one was around to tell me not to litter. I did not have a parental role model to tell me you don't litter. You take your garbage to the corner. And so by doing this, then we realize that everything is either an act of love or a cry for help. Can you give tickets out for people honking their horn? It's on the books. A $350 ticket is what is on the books, I believe, for honking your horn. I don't know how often it's enforced, but to me, that's a good ticket that will improve the quality of life and be a way to generate revenues for the city. Now, eventually, technology will step in, and there will be devices on every corner that basically are able to see exactly where the horn came from. It'll triangulate the sound. It'll do a 3D image of the vehicle, and it'll be able to immediately assess a ticket to someone who honks their horn. So a vehicle will be registered. There'll probably have to be a credit card attached to that vehicle, and then they will probably give you a ticket the moment you honk your horn for each time. So it won't be like if you honk bam 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 is once. That's each time the horn goes on and off. That is a different ticket. We only need laws when technology is not there to suffice. If eventually there's an electrical grid in the city and vehicles aren't allowed to go over 25 miles an hour, there'll be no need for speeding tickets because a vehicle will simply not be able to break the speed limit. So there'll be no need for the law of a speeding ticket. We need them now because there's no way to do it, but in 100, 200 years, however many years, where a vehicle will get on a grid and then an address will be placed in and you'll go there, it'll keep the vehicle at the speed limit. It's only now that we have to enforce these laws. So back to clean streets. What does this mean? It means let's get all the fire hydrants bright red. Let's paint them. Let's make them look nice. Let's honor them for what they are, because they are anchors. Those fire hydrants go down about 6 to 8 feet into the sidewalks. When I worked at Pilot Freight, a freight company out of high school in 1985, you moved freight from one 18-wheeler to another. And one day I had to move 8 fire hydrants. And I didn't realize these things are not just the head of the fire hydrant, but they go down, I think, like 8 feet to connect to the water system. And so these are anchors. And I think that's a good place to start, to paint them bright red as beacons of hope. Now, I'm not opposed to, in certain neighborhoods, if it's Little Italy, painting them the Italian flag color. If you're in Little India, painting them Indian color. I'm not opposed to that, to having some creativity. Now, of course, no good deed goes unpunished, and if you do that, you're going to get people who are going to get upset. How come they get their flag? Why don't we get our flag? So, I don't know. The green mailboxes should be turned into art projects and canvases. On our block, we've had people repaint them, and then we put some gold trim around them, and knock on wood, they have not been graffitied really since we did that. Prior to doing that, they got graffitied a good bit, because once it gets tagged, and some people will have a discrepancy between graffiti and tagging. Tagging is going and just making a mark of some kind to say, I was here, this is my area, so other people know the tag, but again, it still is a cry for help. I think we have to delineate between everything being an act of love or a cry for help. So as opposed to saying someone is doing something maliciously, they're crying for help. So how else can we clean the streets to make clean streets? Now, garbage, fire hydrants, green mailboxes, blue mailboxes, painted, rolling gates. What we've also done is we have someone who's been painting all the rolling gates on our block, 29 between 6 and 7. You can't wait for the city to come do it. The owners or the tenants of the space, they're probably struggling just to stay open. And they don't know how to hire someone to come paint their rolling gate, to put a piece of art on it. And the landlord's probably not going to do it. And if the landlord does do it, he's just going to get the super or the maintenance man just to paint over it silver or gray again, which is fine. It's a start. But then someone's going to look at that blank gray, blank silver as a canvas and graffiti or tag it again. So we have to start looking at all aspects of the city as canvases. How do we make art out of them? And so you take the clean streets, and hopefully by being clean, they become a little safer. This is somewhat incorporating the broken windows philosophy, meaning if there's a broken window, if you don't fix that broken window, then another broken window is going to come, and another. So we also have to try to fix all the broken windows. If it's broken, fix it. If it's tagged or graffitied, paint it. Again, who's going to do this? Well, we do need jobs. There's going to have to be a massive jobs program of some kind for people to clean the streets, paint the streets, maintain the streets. Clean streets hopefully will lead to safer streets, right? Because if everything is a mess, then you're not going to be able to pick out when something is a challenge. But when the streets are clean, then you'll notice things. And hopefully it'll encourage people to not cry for help by littering, tagging, graffitiing, breaking windows for no reason. But there is a reason. It's mental illness. We had somebody during COVID who walked down the block with a hammer and just broke windows of stores. There's a video of it. About 9 of them just went down and boom, boom, boom. That's a cry for help. That's mental illness. Nothing you can do about that except address it and be glad that that person with the hammer was breaking windows and not breaking people's skulls. But we have to be mindful that if someone is mentally ill, it may not be their fault, and they may not even have the wherewithal to really get the help they need because they may not think they need help, but they need help. And I suppose I would adopt a utilitarian approach, which is the greatest good for the greatest number of people. In a city of 8 million, they say 20% of the people cause 80% of the problems. That means in a city of 8 million, 1.6 million people are causing 80% of the problems. Now, I think the goal is to get it down to 10% of the people are causing 90% of the problems. So 10% of 8 million is 800,000. So then you have 800,000 people causing the majority of your challenges. Just the other day, it was announced that the Target in Harlem is shutting down. They're not able to do it anymore. They said it's not worth staying open. They can't keep their employees safe. The theft is too high. So now they're going to just leave. And it was a great target. But no pun intended, it was a soft target. And they were not willing to harden the target, as they say in security. The soft target allowed people to walk in, grab stuff, and walk out. And I wonder, did they do everything they could to stop this? Now, we have a bar, as I said, Pioneers, and in order to walk into our bar, we have a security guard. You have to show your license or ID. We scan it so we know that you're in there, and then there's a camera you have to look up at so that we know who's in our establishment. I don't know if that's even possible or if Target even thought about doing that, but you're going to pay one way or another. So you're either going to pay in lost merchandise or you're going to pay for security. And the challenge is to get real security, it's going to cost you. Can you get some guy or some human to stand there with a security jacket? But what are they really going to do? You need off-duty police officers. Need to be allowed to carry their weapon, have on body armor, and everybody who comes through is coming through a hardened target. They are coming through. It's going to take a little bit longer to get in. You're going to have to show your ID. If you don't have an ID, you have to get one. That has to be made accessible. And then you're going to be photographed or filmed coming in so we know who you are. And the point of exit will be limited. You might even adopt a membership program like Costco. I mean, one of the reasons probably Costco has less theft is you going in and out, you have to show your membership card. Now, anybody will tell you Costco makes their money mostly off the memberships. They probably make some money off the products they sell, but it's probably negligible compared to the membership. That reoccurring yearly fee of who knows how many. It's unfortunate, but Target, other stores may have to have memberships because it seems like you just rolled up and you're leaving. And you're leaving a neighborhood without resource. All the jobs that are leaving, that area because of 10 to 20% of the population who decided that they had no other choice than to come in and steal. And it's unfortunate. I don't want to get too much into that right now because I'd like to do multiple of these. This is just ALI-M.O.N.Y 1 to give you some basic ideas. And again, do I want to be mayor of New York? No. But do I want these ideas utilized, borrowed, taken, implemented? Sure, yeah. I want to be able to walk to work without having motorcycles and scooters and electric vehicles on the sidewalk going the wrong way, driven by someone who may have no ID or no insurance. We had a family friend. She got hit by a guy who was a bicycle delivery guy. Broke her wrist. The guy took off, never found him, and changed the course of her life forever. My heart goes out to anybody in the city who makes a living on a bicycle, especially a bicycle in the rain. You have my heart and my mind. The moment you ride on the sidewalk with your bicycle, you lose me. You frustrate me. Because then at that point, you're trying to turn a first world city into a third world country where people have enough to deal with in terms of just food, clothing, shelter. They can't deal with people driving on the sidewalk. What are they going to do? Give tickets to everybody? But that's the only way to get around it. The only way to deal with it right now is to give tickets to people riding on the sidewalk with a bicycle or a scooter. And if you're going the wrong way. And everybody has to have a license. It all has to be registered. You can't just show up here, get an electric scooter or a motorized gas-powered scooter and start delivering food going the wrong way on a sidewalk, creating mayhem. Now, I understand people want to get their food delivered, and that's fair, and it creates jobs. And it's a new thing in New York, probably the last 10 years. When I got here 2 decades ago, delivery was usually done by restaurants and places where you lived in your area, and they'd have a certain area, and a guy would run out and he'd walk it to you, and then bicycles showed up, and then they would bike to you. And now it's become a cottage industry of scooters and motorcycles and e-bikes, and it can get very chaotic. Now there's no sense of going the right way. You have to look both ways when you walk in New York City because bicycles go both ways now. So clean streets, safe streets, free streets. That simple. What does free mean? Free streets means free to be you and me. That you can walk down the street holding whoever's hand you want and not feel afraid that someone's going to say something. Free to wear what you want. Free to dress how you want. I mean, let's put a pin in genital nudity right now. Let's just say for now, within limits, you can be free. But for the sake of the children, let's just for now put genital nudity on the back burner, right? Sure. Maybe in 100, 200 years, we'll say complete nudity is fine. We'll all be cool with it, but still, it'll be hard for people not to gawk at something that's large or something that's small or whatever. So let's say you can be topless from the waist up, right? And I would say ostensibly male or female, or male or female identifying. Although you will get hoots and hollers. People are going to say stuff. That's just, unfortunately. There's not a way where you can get people to go, look, don't say anything. It's not your place to catcall. A person should be able to walk down the street to some degree completely naked in heels, and no one should be allowed to say anything to them. But that's not the society we live in. But hopefully the clean streets lead to the safe streets, which lead to the free streets. But it's going to be complicated. How do we fix this city? Because to me, it is the greatest city in the world. I love it. I love New York City. I love the buildings. I love the diaspora. I love that people have come from all around the world to engage in this experiment in democracy and society. And it's my home, and has been my home for over 2 decades. I've primarily focused on small comedy theater world, and it's what I enjoy. It's the community I enjoy, to be around comedy people and people doing bits. And, we still have work to do. We still have rent to pay every 30 days. We still have Con Edison to pay every 30 days. We have payroll to make. We have our data, Verizon, depending on who you use. We have insurance. The costs gather, and I would say they have fully doubled since we began this. So when people ask, where does inflation come from? Well, I don't know. I'll say our rents have fully doubled, so inflation has come from our rent getting higher. Our Con Edison has fully doubled, if not more, since we began, so that leads to inflation. Our insurance costs have fully doubled, so that leads to inflation. Our data costs, phone and internet, fully doubled. That leads to inflation. The cost of buying goods has doubled. Minimum wage has gone up from $7.25 an hour when we began to $15 an hour. And I don't have any issue with that. To me, I don't even know how 15 works unless you have multiple jobs. But there is minimum wage and there's no maximum rent. There's minimum wage, but there's no maximum insurance. So it seems like with certain parts of the economy and the small business owner and those running businesses, they are willing to impose certain laws, but not others. Because then they say, well, then you are playing with the free market. But yet you're telling us how much to pay people. And to some degree, we had more people working when minimum wage was lower. And we'd had them working for more hours. But it might have been less to live in New York City. So I think that's some music coming from, interesting, maybe from the streets. That's the streets of New York. It's not perfect. I'm sitting in a window and I'm talking and there's music playing, and that's life. I don't know if it's coming from the theater or from outside. But if I were to run, it would begin with a series of these ALI-M.O.N.Y podcasts to see if there's anybody interested in this, or people like, just stick to what you do, buddy, whatever it is you do, because we don't know who you are, because you're a ghost. And that's the reality of it. All of us really, who knows anybody? I watched this great documentary the other day, Breaking Point, about a tennis player named Marty Fish, who was during the era of Roddick. And I never heard of him. And I love tennis. And if you would have told me he was a professional tennis player and the people he'd beaten, I was like, I've never heard of this guy. But I guess I checked out for that part in my life in tennis. All right, I don't want to get off track there, although I'd love to figure out a way to bring tennis to all the children in the New York City area and see who's out there. How do you use the resources you have to give children really places to play, playgrounds? Now, this first one, I think I'd like to keep this short, so I'm going to try to get out of this under 40 to 45 minutes because I don't want this to go on forever. I don't even know who's still listening, to this initial first podcast, recording. I don't even know what you call this. But to some degree, it's also for me to understand, do I really want to do this? And the answer is no, I don't want to do it. I know how difficult it would be. I know how difficult it is running a small little business, a small comedy theater. Every day there are challenges. I can't even imagine what it's like running a city, especially right now with the migrant crisis. All the people coming from various parts of the world to New York City. Are there enough jobs for them? Is there housing for them? Are there opportunities for them? What's going to happen to them? Where are they going to go? And I'm sure people say, well, they can live with friends and family. What if they have no friends and family here? It's going to get precarious more so in this city if we don't find solutions. The challenge is the decisions nationally with the border have created a situation that now affects cities all over this country who are taking on migrants who really their own nations would normally have to, I don't want to say deal with, but accommodate. It just happens to be that the proximity of the southern border is close enough that it is possible to cross it and get here. And if you get here and you're willing to work, there are jobs. In some nations, there's just no jobs. So I think to some degree, that's why some of these nations are complicit in allowing the migration of their immigrants, because they do not have work for their young men and women, and especially young men of military age who, if you don't find something for them to do, eventually they're going to be a challenge, because then they're going to turn around and look at you and go, where's my job? Where's my life? Where's my wife? Where's my partner? So for those nations, it's in their best interest to send them to other countries to make money and then send money back, because there's not enough money in their nation to be made. The jobs aren't there, and that gets more complicated. Why that is. I'm going to keep this at, I think, under 40 minutes. Clean streets, safe streets, free streets. Now, how does this affect schools? Well, if the school has clean streets around where the school is, then that will lead to safer streets. Now, it's not going to just wave a magic wand, and because all the mailboxes are painted and the fire hydrants are painted and there's no garbage on the streets, does that immediately make a street safe? No. But it is a path to a safer street and a safer school area and a safer living area. Then the free streets, that's the challenging part, to convince people to just let it be. Judge not, lest ye be judged, and do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Those two rules are enough to live a life. Don't judge somebody unless you want them to judge you. And treat them the way you want to be treated. That's it. Keep it that simple. If you see somebody walking down the street, take a deep breath. When I went to Burning Man, I was seeing so much so quickly. And part of going to Burning Man is you've got to mention it. And I'm remiss for not mentioning it in the first 5 minutes of this, but I saw so much that I just had to come up with something. So when I'd see something, I would just say to myself, okay. Because otherwise my mind would just start thinking about what I just saw. And there was so much visual imagery that you have to find a way to derail the monkey mind. And a deep breath can do that as well. I think under 40 minutes is a good layer for the first alimony. And then after this, I'm going to try to potentially pick topics. And then each one will be a different topic. This is just an intro topic. And maybe I'll go a little longer. I don't know. Who am I? What's my story? I was born in Isfahan, Iran, in the fall of '68. We came to America summer of '69. I'll be 55 in October of 23. And I don't know. I've never held any political office in school or otherwise. I've never run for political office, never really aspired to. As an immigrant, I'm not allowed to run for the office of the presidency. It's a position where basically it says no need to apply. I think someday that will be challenged, because even the presidency is a job. And if there is a job that says you, who are an immigrant, you're not allowed to apply for this job, eventually that has to be challenged. And also as an immigrant, I can tell you that, it disenfranchises children and people knowing that no matter how hard you work or try, the highest office in the land is not available to you. It's not so much that I cannot seek the highest office in the land, it's that the highest office in the land cannot seek me. And I think it's so difficult to be elected president that almost to some degree you should be able to say, look, anybody, if you run and you get elected, good for you, as opposed to putting age restrictions on it, or even felony restrictions on it, or any restrictions. Because from here on out, I think whoever wins the presidency, it's going to be 51-49 or 50.5, 49.5. But I just don't see anybody running away with a landslide anymore. I think it's just going to be close every single time. I also think the presidency, along with the mayor of New York, should be 1 6-year term. So that way you spend no time campaigning. You run, you get elected, and you do the best you can. Now you know what's going to happen by year 4 or 5. You become somewhat of a lame duck president or mayor because they know you're leaving. But now, after 4 years of being president, you basically by year 3 you have to begin to campaign again. And so then you campaign and then you get it. And then what? Then you get another 4 years. So you get another 2 years of doing stuff. And then the last 2 years, a year for sure, you're lame duck. It's hard to get anything done because now people are so divided in their beliefs. And I know there are some beliefs that we're just never going to see eye to eye on. But we have to figure out, where is there common ground? What do we see eye to eye on? What are our common beliefs? Let's forget about the ones that will divide us maybe till the end of time. And let's find some that'll go, what do we want? And that's why I want to keep it simple. We all want, I assume, clean streets, right? Now some say, well, New York's not gritty without that. Look, I'm saying get the same artists, the same graffiti artists, the same taggers, figure out a way where they get paid and materials get covered and rolling gates get painted and people have time. Figure out a way where those same green mailboxes get painted, turn into canvases, the same way that, various cities have used, like cows painted by artists, or a giant apple painted by artists, or German shepherds. We don't need to look further to find canvases in the city. We do and should find places for graffiti artists and taggers to tag large walls that, probably get painted every 3 or 4 months, but you can go and you can paint your art on those walls. And we should set those up in places. But we should also let people know so everybody's on the same page. Everything is either an act of love or a cry for help. And as long as we're on the same page about that, then we know, this littering is a cry for help. Your honking of the horn is a cry for help. Your tagging of rolling gates and mailboxes and graffitiing is a cry for help. You're really saying, I want to be an artist. Notice me. I was here. I'm alive. That's the great fear, is mortality and our own mortality. But if you try to name a mayor 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people wouldn't know his name. There are presidents of the United States that if you put on a test, people would not know. They may know George Washington. They may know Abraham Lincoln. They may know Thomas Jefferson. But as many people may know George Jefferson from the Jeffersons, because they were moving on up to that deluxe apartment in the sky in the Upper East Side. So I don't know who among us will be remembered, and who will be remembered among us in 5,000, 10,000 years, if we're even around. Because everything that's not about global warming, which is, as everyone says, an existential threat, but it is the number one issue, and everything else aside from global warming is a distraction. It won't matter. We won't be here, or the life that we have will be so Mad Max, so Thunderdome in 10,000 years that it'll just be looking for water, food, shelter, roving gangs defending your loved ones. It'll be back to cave times if we don't, at this point right now, make a decision to really preserve this paradise in the Milky Way, which is Earth, that we've slowly destroyed the atmosphere. And this summer in New York City, the heat doesn't seem real right now because it's a pretty cool, beautiful fall day in New York. And I'll take New York on a fall day over almost any city in the world. I love the city. But there were days that the heat was unbearable. And there was also days where the smoke from the Canadian fires was unbearable. So it is coming. And it has to be dealt with. But all we can deal with it is as a globe, as a world. You cannot deal with global warming as a city, a state, a nation, even a continent. Australia might be able to because of their size and their distance from other people, but still, it's going to affect everybody. It's coming. And it has to be a global effort. There are certain things that have to be dealt with globally by a world of nations taking the lead. Because I have, for me, have not seen a more chaotic world in my lifetime. And maybe just because I'm older and I'm awake and I see more on the news feeds and on the TV phones we all have, and the TV phones are their own addiction. Those TV phones allow us to listen to people, and if someone listens to this, they're probably going to be listening to it through their TV phone. Some people probably forget that it's even a phone or even use it as a phone. But if I did run, and again, I'm not saying I would, but this allows me to get some thoughts out, and maybe one person will hear this and they'll go, hey, this is a good idea. We should make sure that everybody is licensed to drive a scooter, an electric vehicle, anything with a motor, anything that's not beyond human powered. You need to have a license and be registered. A bicycle, yeah, eventually, sure. You should have, if somebody pulls you over, a police officer, you should have identification on you. Everybody. And we have to figure that out as well. And, there's other topics I'll talk about, and hopefully they'll be shorter than this, but this is just an intro to the idea of Ali, Mayor of New York, ALI-M.O.N.Y. But we've got to get rid of tinted windows. No police officer should have to walk up to a vehicle and not be able to see in the front and back seat clearly. I don't know how this happened. I don't know who allowed this to happen. But this has to be stopped immediately. You should be able to look into every vehicle that enters New York City or is in the 5 boroughs and see clearly. No police officer should have to be afraid going up to a vehicle and not knowing who's in the back seat and who's in the front seat. It's just that simple. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm sure it's going to affect the tinted windows business, and I'm sure that came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden this became a payday for people who did tinted windows, but they need to come off. You can figure out a way to reduce the UV rays for whatever reason, but windows don't need any tint of any kind. They should be clear, crystal clear, to be able to see through them. Well, I don't want to go off on tangents because, as I said, this one is just the first Ali-M.O.N.Y intro. A little conversation. Again, I don't know who I'm doing this for, who's listening, who may be interested in this. Hopefully some of the 8 million people who live in New York City, because no matter where you live, how high a tower you live in, if you live in the high towers and you work in the high towers and you look down on those of us who walk the streets and clean the streets and live in New York City, we're all in this together. There's no way around it. I guess you can go from your Escalade to your parking circle where you live, up to your apartment, back down again, have your food delivered by Amazon or Whole Foods or wherever, and, go to all the expensive things in New York and really have guards and protection, and hopefully you stay protected. But you won't be able to be protected from the heat. You'll have to go outside from the global warming, or the global broiling, as people have now called it. And also in my lifetime, I've seen the phrase go from hobo. People called people hobos. It's a term of endearment, someone who was homeless. It went to hobo, to homeless, to unhoused. And now I think we need to find phraseology, because words have value, where we place it not on the person, but of society. So maybe capitalism's failures, society's failure, as opposed to calling someone homeless or unhoused. It's really we've failed them in some way. Because why don't we have a place for them to live? And I'm not talking about paradise. I'm talking about a room of your own. I'm talking about access to a clean bathroom, a shower, a desk, a cold box for your food, a window with a view of something. Doesn't have to be great, but is it too much to ask to figure out how we get each person who wants it a room? And some type of work. And ultimately it's pay now or pay later. Like you see what's happening in the Target in Harlem, they're shutting it down. So as opposed to figuring out a way to give these people who were doing the stealing jobs and resources to go, look, let's make sure you've got water, you've got food, and here's some jobs just to do, to clean and paint and organize the city, to put a little money in your pocket. Now, I'm sure at some point in the future there'll be subdermal liquid microchips injected into people's wrists, and that's how you'll get your money, and that's how you'll pay for things. This future's coming. Whatever you can think of, it's happening. Unfortunately, though, when you do some type of iris scan where someone has to look into a scanner with their eye to open a door, eventually you know what's going to happen in the movie. Someone is going to, trigger alert, scoop out that eyeball to get in. If you put a subdermal liquid microchip into someone's wrist, someone's going to eventually cut off that wrist to use it because there's money in that wrist or whatever. It's going to happen. There's always going to be predators and prey. But we have to always look towards how do we help those the least among us, the ones who need the most help, the ones who need a helping hand, who are older, who are young, who are, I say, disabled in some way, mentally or physically. Because all of life is luck, really. To me, everything I have, 99% of what I have is due to luck. The parents I had, the mind I was given, the body I was given, the tools I was given to be able to talk into a microphone and be able to say these things is luck that I have access to this. And those who are given much, much is expected. And I've been given a lot. And I've tried to do what I can, and I'm not some icon of productivity. I struggle with my own challenges of situational depression, seasonal depression, maybe some clinical depression, my own sense of have I done enough? Have I lived up to my potential? Have I helped as many people as I could? But still, I feel like there's more to do. And again, I don't know if I want to be mayor of New York, and this is not to impugn the mayor or any mayor. I would prefer people just took these ideas and said, hey, this guy's making some valid points. We should look into this. Yes, all the streets should be clean. And if the city can't do it, maybe we encourage the people on the streets to do it. We encourage building owners and landlords to say, hey, get a gallon of green paint and pay somebody to paint the mailboxes green whenever they get graffitied. Get a gallon of Rust-Oleum bright red paint and paint the fire hydrants. Do it yourself. Pay somebody. If you're a landlord on a block and you own a building, put someone on payroll to do nothing but clean the streets. You can do it. If you're a major landlord and you make that kind of money, you can create a decent job for someone sweeping the streets. It's an intangible, but it will drive the tangibles. It will drive the property value up. See, that's the challenge right now in New York City. What we've gotten into with the rents and the property taxes. And also, where is the money going to come for all of this? That's the challenging part. Where is the money going to come from? But if the electrical grid was shut off, if some type of super alien was able to clear everyone's bank account who had a bank account down to zero, we would still have to figure out a way to do business, to do trade for fruits and vegetables and water, and all those things would have to continue. How would they continue? They continued during COVID. During COVID, we were not able to pay rent because we were closed. Now, eventually, we had to pay the butcher's bill for the places we ended up staying. But life went on, to some degree. It's hard to even imagine that time, the COVID time. It's surreal. And I don't know if the best decisions were made because it destroyed a lot of businesses. But what I try to utilize is perspective. Yes, we lost 4 businesses. Yes, we're a shell of what we used to be, but we still serve a very vibrant, loving community of comedians and artists who are looking to have stage time and get up on stage and take classes and better their lives through improvisation and comedy and have friendships and community. So we're still here. But it's not easy. And no one really cares if we're a comedy theater. Con Edison doesn't give us a discount because we're a comedy theater. Insurance doesn't give us a discount because we're a comedy theater and we're trying to bring laughter to people. The gift of laughter. Because laughter has no accent. And that's the beautiful thing about it. When you make somebody laugh, you can't tell where they're from or if they have an accent. And that's why I love comedy. And right now, I'm not trying to be punny. Sure, I've said a few things that, people will say, let's put a pin in genital nudity as we walk down the streets for now, but that's the reality of it. For right now, let's just say, look, you're free to be you and me, free to be who you are, holding hands. But just remember, there's children, too. We don't need to scare children. And maybe they wouldn't be scared by genital nudity. I don't know. Or maybe they'd be comparisons because of it. I don't know. But let's just keep it simple for now. Let's keep it real simple. Keep your side of the street clean. I think there was a phrase in Rome. If you keep your stoop clean and swept, the rest of the Rome will be clean. The Rome. So, that's where it begins. Keep your side of the street clean. In front of your store, in front of your house, in front of your building. Best you can. And don't get your ego caught up in it. Well, no one's picking up garbage. Why should I? I do it as exercise. I pick up garbage as I walk down the street because it's a good way as you're getting older to bend over, fine motor skills, picking something up, throwing it away, and just feeling like a little bit of exercise. So you're moving. I think we do need that kind of getting lower to the ground movement to occur in order for us to feel like we're alive. 100 years, they'll be all new people. And things are either getting better or they're getting worse. They never stay the same. So I want to help New York City get better. I want to help New York City get magical. I don't know if I want to run for mayor. In fact, I really don't. I don't want to be a politician, although I'd love to take batting practice with a baseball team or throw out a first pitch or, hit a few balls at a U.S. Open or, all the cool things about being mayor would be wonderful. Free rent, love to get free rent. That's the holy grail in New York City. And I would work hard. I would work 6 to 7 days a week. I would do what I can. I would try to experience every job in the city to see what it's like, to get a real understanding of what it's like to be a police officer, a firefighter, I don't want to say garbage person because that seems like a negative thing because people have called people garbage people. I've got to come up with a different phrase for the folks who pick up our garbage, something that has dignity around it because they are referred to as New York's strongest. But every job, bus drivers, subway conductors, every job I'd like to see what is it, what's the reality of it. I'd like to figure out why are garbage cans overflowing? Why aren't we picking them up? Can they be bigger? Or if they're bigger, then you can't lift them up. Do we need to have 2 in a corner? Do we need to sell off all our garbage cans to other countries who would be happy to have our garbage cans and update our garbage cans? Do we need to update our street signs and then sell off all our street signs on like some website and get new street signs with bigger words, bigger letters, and easier to read? I think it's about flow. It's the organic distribution of wealth. It's about creating jobs. It's about creating flow and bringing money into New York City. How do you do it? There'll be a lot of topics I'll talk about. I won't talk about them for an hour each time. But this time, whether I wanted to or not, I'm going to stop before it hits 1 hour. I'm going to stop right under it. Because I think I already went too long and too far, and I honestly don't know who's going to listen to this, but I hope someone listens to it. Maybe someone who listens to it is young, because I think the voting age in New York should be 16. I think if you're 16, you should be able to vote for mayor of New York. And then if someone says, well, what about 14? Sure, 14 too. To me, the voting age in New York City should be, if you're anybody, a child, you can pull that ballot. You should be allowed to vote because this is your city. We shouldn't wait till you're 18 years old to be able to vote. You should be able to vote. And, I don't know. How young? I don't know. 12, 10? Sure, in some science fiction world, you get a baby, you put them in a harness of some kind, you have all the candidates, and you send the baby over wherever the baby makes a bowel movement. That's who we voted for. Sure, in some science fiction world. But I think the voting age in the city of New York should be lower, because the children will eventually be the adults, and they should have a say in how the city's run, in their safety, and how they get around. We should always look at the city through the eyes of toddlers and children, and puppies and dogs, really. And that's why the streets should be clean, because you don't want your dog who you love, if you're lucky enough to have a dog, and not everybody is, but someday, hopefully, the law of the land, if you get the right Supreme Court justices on the bench, will be that everyone has to have a dog by the age of 16 in America. If you get the right people on the Supreme Court, you can get anything passed. That's what I've learned. It is the most, aside from starting a war, putting people on the Supreme Court is the most powerful job a president has. And that's why people probably aspire to be presidents, because they can put people on the Supreme Court and then they're there for life. But now we're getting into another topic. And I don't want to get into that topic. I want to say, look, I thank you for listening to Ali-M.O.N.Y. This is episode 1. Ali, Mayor of New York. I really don't want to be the mayor. but I would like somebody to step up to be the mayor that looks at it from every New Yorker's perspective. Let's just start by cleaning your street. Sweep your street, keep it clean, paint a mailbox, paint a fire hydrant. Above all else, do no harm and do not create a wake of chaos in your path. Have a nice day. I love you, New York City.